Hi everyone! The first thing that we're going to learn about is saw blade sizes. Jeweler's saw blades are ultra fine and have many sharp teeth. The smallest saw blades are extremely thin, almost the thinness of a strand of hair, and have many tiny teeth. As the blade sizes increase, so does the blade thickness, but the larger a blade is, the less teeth it will have per inch. Jeweler's saw blades are sized on a scale. Consider size 0 to be the middle of the scale. Larger saw blades are to the right of 0 and numbered number 1, number 2, number 3, etc. Smaller saw blades would be to the left of the number 0 and numbered 1/0, 2/0, 3/0. But whenever you see a number with a slash and then a 0, the 0 is pronounced at. So the sizes are actually 1/0, 2/0, 3/0, etc. It's important to choose the right size blade for the thickness of the material being cut. If your blade size is too big for the metal, it will catch and grab. And if the saw blade is too small or thin, it will be ineffective and the saw blade is going to dull very quickly. A kerf is the groove or slit created when you cut into the metal. When you're working with precious metals like gold or silver, you don't want to waste metal by cutting broad kerfs. Thinner blades allow for a smaller kerf and less material lost. You want to aim to have 3 teeth on the metal's thickness. So if the metal sheet is thicker, you're going to need to use a larger blade size. For tips on how to secure your saw blade into the frame, refer to my other video titled Loading a Saw Frame. It's essential that your saw blade is loaded in the correct direction and tightly enough. Otherwise, you're going to break a lot of saw blades, which will ultimately make your sawing take way longer than it needs to, and your cuts are going to look jagged and disjointed. To test that your saw blade is positioned tightly enough in the frame, pluck your loaded saw blade and listen for a high-pitched ping noise. A bench pin is a wooden block that's attached to your jeweler's bench, and it has a V shape cut out of the middle. They're tools used to help you steady your hands as you work. When you're sawing, you need to hold the metal firmly and flat to the pin with your non-dominant hand. The cutout V shape allows you to saw into the metal and then turn it without losing grip on the metal or sacrificing stability. Portable bench pins come with C-clamps and allow you to be flexible with where you work. You need to make sure you're choosing a stable surface to attach your portable bench pin to, like a counter or a heavy desk or table, so that the surface isn't moving around while you saw. To set it up, slide the flat part of the C-clamp through the rectangular hole in the bench pin, and then slide the clamp part underneath the table or counter. Then, tighten the clamp until the bench pin is stable. If you've ever been to a jewelry studio, you might have noticed that the chairs seem really low. That's because when you're sawing, you don't want to be hunched over for hours while you work. Not only is this really bad for your back, but it'll also make it really difficult for you to saw perpendicularly to the metal. You want the bench pin to be on the same plane as your armpit. To measure the correct height, sit in your chair with your feet flat on the floor, hold your elbows against your ribs, bring your palms together in front of your chest like you're doing a namaste pose, and place your bench pin right at that height. When you're ready to saw, place yourself squarely in front of the metal and bench pin with both feet planted firmly on the floor. Lightly brace the saw handle in your hand without clenching. Grip the saw handle with your thumb and index finger, and then lightly wrap your other fingers around the handle. Your sawing will feel easier and smoother if you lubricate the saw blade prior to sawing. So before you begin, locate some burr life, as shown in the video, or a small chunk of any kind of household wax, like candle wax, and give the back of your saw blade a swipe. Make sure this is the back side and not the side of the blade with teeth, because lubricant will clog up the teeth of the blade. When you're ready to start sawing metal, try sawing a straight line first. In the video, I just drew a line on the metal with a permanent marker. This line can be removed later with sandpaper. With your non-dominant hand, hold the metal flat to the bench pin. With the saw frame in your dominant hand, start by making a few angled swipes into your metal so that you're creating a notch for your saw blade to sit. Once you begin sawing, make sure that your saw blade is completely perpendicular to the metal at all times. This is imperative if you want your line to be straight. Think of your saw blade as the needle on a sewing machine and only allow it to go straight up and down, never slanted forward at an angle. Any movement in your arm should be coming from your elbow. Since your elbow is your pivot point, think of your hand and forearm as a single unit that is following the direction of the elbow. There should be no strain in your hand or wrist. Saw blades work by weakening and then chipping away small particles of metal. Do not push your saw blade against the metal. Let the saw blade do the work. Pushing will put too much pressure on the blade and cause it to break. As you saw, take long, even strokes. Each tooth of the saw blade should touch the metal with each pass. Sawing a curve isn't much different than sawing a straight line, but you need to keep an eye on approaching curves or changes in direction. When you're sawing a curve or turning around a corner, continue to keep your saw blade facing forward and perpendicular to the metal. If you turn the saw, you will put tension on the blade and it will break. Trust me. Instead, slowly turn the metal while keeping the saw blade facing forward and the metal flat to the bench pin. If the curve is really sharp, slowly saw in place for a few strokes before turning the metal, and continue doing this until you're all the way around the curve or corner. By sawing in place, the saw blade is cutting out a channel for the saw blade to make a turn in. This will allow you to make sharper turns without snapping the blade. Always make sure to keep your fingers out of the path of the saw blade. Piercing is another form of sawing, but it specifically refers to when you cut interior pieces out of a larger piece of metal. Before you cut a design, clearly mark off which interior pieces need to be pierced from your design, like I did in the image shown. Next, use a center punch to make a divot in each interior space, and then drill a hole into each of these sections. Use these holes to feed your saw blade through, and then use your body weight to push the saw frame in as you tighten the frame's knobs. Then, finish cutting out the shapes like you normally would. Always complete any piercing before sawing the outside of your design. Also, start by piercing out your smallest interior section first and end with your largest section so that you'll always be working with as much surface area as you can. This helps you be more stable as you saw because it gives your non-dominant hand more to hold on to. If you want to cut a design out of metal, you can draw directly on the metal with a permanent marker. But if your design needs to be really precise, or if you want to saw the same design multiple times like you would for a pair of earrings, then you can print out multiple images of your design or make copies of a design that you sketched. Next, cut the images out of paper, leaving a small border around the design. Apply a thin layer of rubber cement to the back of your paper and another thin layer on the metal. Let the glue dry for about 30 seconds or until the glue is pretty tacky. Then put the paper design on the metal and press the design down onto the metal really well so that the edges don't flip up as you're sawing. Rub away any excess glue with your fingers. Once the glue is dried, begin sawing out your design. Again, if there are any areas that need to be pierced out, you'll want to start with those and start with the smallest hole, working your way up in size. When you're cutting out the perimeter of your design, make sure that your saw blade is positioned on the outside of the design. That way, if you make a mistake, it'll just be the excess metal that can be filed away rather than a mistake that you can't undo, like if you were to accidentally cut inwards into the design. When you're done sawing out your design, you can just peel off the paper with your fingernails and the leftover rubber cement can be rubbed off with your fingers. This method is really good for production jewelry or if you have any designs that has multiples in it or any scaled shapes. I hope you enjoyed my video and thanks for watching.